The history of the American nation does not have such long roots as, for example, the history of the Egyptians or the Chinese. However, national superiority is so entrenched in the minds of the inhabitants of the American continent that this gene of exceptionalism is passed on from generation to generation. This idea can be traced not only in peacetime, but also during combat operations. American soldiers do not always treat the enemy kindly. Sometimes the methods used go beyond any limits of humanism and cause condemnation not only from the inhabitants of other countries, but also from the Americans themselves. This was the case, for example, during World War II. The American military took part in battles in the Pacific theater of war, and they behaved very aggressively there. Aggression was manifested not only in relation to the living enemy, but also in relation to the already dead. From the very beginning of the Second World War, there was a widespread practice when body parts of dead Japanese soldiers were taken as trophies. Various items could be made from them. Souvenirs, jewelry, stationery were made, and some even made entire collections. It's hard to imagine how such collections could be kept at home. But most American servicemen did not give up such collecting. This phenomenon has been called the trophy phenomenon. At first it was not so widespread, but when the phenomenon became widespread, it was discussed in all magazines and newspapers. The press reported that even Roosevelt received such an unusual gift. A writing knife was made from a human hand for him. However, Roosevelt, under the influence of the public, was forced to return the souvenir that had been presented to him. He also made a request for the proper repose of the deceased. When the trophy phenomenon reached its climax, the American public became very indignant, and to avoid a wave of protests and national unrest, the American commanders decided to condemn such trophyism. In 1942, a directive was issued, according to which American soldiers were forbidden to do such things. Enemy body parts were not to be used as souvenirs or in any other way. However, no severe punishment was imposed. A U.S. serviceman who violated the established prohibition was subject to disciplinary action. So such a directive did not stop the U.S. military, and they continued to engage in horrible collecting throughout the war. Soon the trophy phenomenon became famous all over the world. In May 1944, Life magazine published a creepy picture in its photo of the week section. In front of a girl stood a human skull, and she was looking at it attentively. And there was absolutely no horror in her eyes. Rather, it was curiosity, and even a slight shade of romanticism. There was an explanatory note to the photo. Such a creepy souvenir was sent to this girl by her beloved lieutenant of the U.S. Navy. It was a symbol of their mutual promise of eternal love, and the former head used to belong to a Japanese soldier. The trophy was found by an American serviceman in New Guinea. Not only did he pick it up, but all his fellow soldiers signed it. Opinions on this publication were divided. Some very strongly condemned such a mockery of the deceased. Others used the photograph as an ideological tool. They propagated the idea that the enemy was not a human being at all. So you shouldn't worry about his fate. It's like an animal. That must be hunted. So it is normal to collect such trophies. Some have taken the position that the use of inhumane methods during this war is justified. The military is fighting the enemy. Therefore, they must use a variety of methods to win, and absolutely no pity for the enemy, neither during the battle nor after it is over. The U.S. Armed Forces also reacted to this publication. A memorandum was sent to the Ministry of Defense, which was drafted by Emma Kramer, Judge Advocate General of the U.S. Army. He had condemned such actions before, but after this publication, he became even more zealous in defending the inadmissibility of such a method of warfare. He even called such behavior a violation of the laws of war. No army in the world should behave in this way. It is inhuman and contrary to nature. The one who sent such a parcel to his beloved was reprimanded, but not for the gift itself, but for the fact that this picture was published. That is, the military man was accused of having created materials that could be used as methods of information warfare against the United States. To this day, some participants of the Second World War still find such trophy souvenirs. If possible, they try to repatriate the remains. Different opinions have been formed not only about the phenomenon itself, but also about the reasons for its occurrence. The most widespread version is that during the Second World War, there was a campaign to dehumanize the Japanese. In the American media, actively spread the version that the Japanese are not a full-fledged people, that they should not even be considered human beings. Truman claimed that they understood only one language. It was the language of bombing. In fact, they are animals who have to be spoken to in their animal language. It's sad, of course, but it can't be helped. So we have to treat this nation the way it deserves to be treated. The media said that the Japanese were using inhumane methods of warfare. Therefore, the same methods should be used against them. Ideas about how to behave in the occupied territories and how to treat prisoners were planted, and no humanization should be applied to the conquered countries. The Japanese have been described as barbarians, who themselves behave horribly to conquered peoples, who don't treat captives as human beings, and the imperial troops are also particularly brutal. The commanders themselves are indifferent to the lives of their soldiers. All moral and ethical standards in the Japanese army have long been forgotten, and they also destroyed a considerable number of American soldiers, and for this their surviving fellow soldiers need to take revenge. Any of these factors could have been used as the basis for the use of aggression. They combined to produce an enraged American army, which treated the Japanese with extreme brutality. Even special hunting licenses were distributed to those of draft age. These were slogans of a kind that urged young Americans to fight Japanese aggression. For example, they might say that the season for hunting the Japanese was open, or that hunters would be rewarded. Some soldiers didn't just make trophy souvenirs, they also captured it all on film. The photos look creepy. However, the participants of the war on them are quite happy. They even have fun from their deeds. The footage showed the process of taking and searching for trophies, as well as finished products. It was even considered honorable to get such a trophy. A soldier who extracted the remains of the enemy was considered a hero, and their relatives back home, having received such a souvenir, even bragged about it to friends and relatives. Naturally, this caused a huge wave of indignation, anger, and disgust towards the Americans in Japan. It could not have been otherwise. After all, such methods of war are condemned by all civilized countries, and America often calls itself just such a country. But as we see, not all pages of the history of this state are white. However, no one is in a hurry to answer for their deeds.